Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today I am joined by Rabbi Yosef Wikler, longtime editor of Kashrus Magazine. Thank you, Rabbi Wikler, for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed being here.
Appreciate it. So I'd like to discuss a very important topic with you today, and one that I know you have a unique perspective on, and that is insect infestation in foods in general. Talk a little about your vantage point. You've put out Kashrus Magazine now for 43 years. Things have evolved, things have changed, whether it's pesticides, whether it's the greenhouses. There are a lot of hydroponic type of produced vegetables and so on and so forth. So give us a little primer on the world of kashrus as it relates to insect infestation.
In 1 hour or 2 hours? That's a big topic. A little bit I'd like to share with you about my own history when I was a kid. When I was a kid, everybody used romaine lettuce for Pesach, and we just used romaine lettuce. We didn't think twice. Then they started to announce to us, no, you can't use romaine lettuce. You have to soak it in salt water for, 20 minutes, a half an hour, and then it's good to go. And then afterwards, a couple of years later, they said, no, salt water is the wrong thing. It's vinegar you have to use. And we did it in vinegar. And we tried to get rid of the taste of the vinegar. We did our best we could. And and then it kept going up and up and up. Then they started telling us, you have to use, you have to check it by the light. You go to the window and you hold up each leaf and hold it to the light of the window from the sunlight, and if you don't see any bugs, it's good. And then afterwards they said, no, you need a light box. And then it got more exciting that, but in case you miss something, maybe you should use a jeweler's loupe to check it. So things kept going on, and now it's beyond that. We're now up to a more advanced stage of where people are using what they call the shmata bedika. They have a certain cloth that they use to check the water, and from that, if they see if any insects, then we have a problem with the product. If there's no insects in the water, then we feel there's nothing on the product itself. That's the history of kashrus there. So the average person is getting very worried. He said, when I was a kid, and my mother, and that generation, they didn't use anything. We ate vegetables. How come every few years the rabbis get together in a secret meeting and they decide, this year we're going to hit strawberries. Next year we're going to hit this. We're going to answer blueberries. It's getting so crazy. And then water in New York City. No fish, anisakis and everything. It's crazy. How can they do this? What are they doing to us? They're getting too frum for us. So let me take you back in history to 1900. 1900. There was a tshuva. You have the Yechiel Michal Epstein in the Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Peiches in Sif Samach Beis writes the following. He said, sauerkraut. People want to put sauerkraut up. What you do is you take cabbage, and then you put it into vinegar, and you leave it the whole winter, and it turns into sauerkraut. But there are tons of bugs that can be in there, tons. So he said, you've got to check each leaf of cabbage 2 or 3 times. Not 1, 2 or 3 times. Each leaf has to be checked before you put it up, and then right away put it up for the winter. Don't let it sit around the house for another day, because then the eggs will turn into bugs, and you're going to have problems. That was in 1900. So in 1940s, they developed DDT, which is a special insecticide that was man-made, and it took off like wildfire, and it killed all the insects. Maybe too many, and the government didn't like that. Plus the fact they killed a few other people too, so they didn't like that, and eventually it was stopped in 1972. They stopped using DDT. But for those 30 years, we were using it. So 1959, Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote a tshuva. It's in Chelek Aleph Yoredeya, Sif Lamed Hey. I'm sorry, Tshuva Lamed Hey. So there he talks about sauerkraut, and he talks about what was in the Haim in the old days, what he remembers from Europe. And he said in Europe it was tak infested, and you couldn't use it unless you checked it very, very thoroughly, like the Aruch HaShulchan was saying. He says, but today, the farmers got it under control. He doesn't refer to DDT, but they got it under control, and things are good. But then again, are the farmers always doing a perfect job? And the Yerei Shemayim may still be wanting to check his vegetables, and so he recommended to check vegetables. And someone who was close to Rav Moshe told me what he recommended was to take a leaf and look at the outside light, the window of the house with the sun, and just look at it for a second, look around, that's good. Not to work too hard on it, but every leaf to be checked. That's what he personally recommended. And in the tshuva, he doesn't say it's required, but he definitely recommends it. So that's in 1959, and we already had the DDT, and Rav Moshe is still recommending checking cabbage.
I mean, just to point out, insecticides are great, but there's a level of acceptability that, let's say, the FDA will be okay with, that halacha won't, right? It's not one and the same. The FDA might be okay with a certain level of infestation.
You can't use it anymore. I mean, infestation.
That's what I mean. Infestation.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. They may be okay if the bug level is below.
But it was hitting good numbers. We were hitting good numbers, and that's why we never heard about this. That's why when we were growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever it is, we didn't know about this whole thing yet, because not until 1972, when they got rid of DDT, was there ever an issue.
I see.
Because we were growing up in that takufa from 1940s to the 1970s. So all the guys like me, we didn't see anything. So therefore, people my age or older a little bit, they didn't know anything about any bugs in vegetables. Maybe back in Europe, but we took care of it in our modern society. We have no problem. That's what we thought. But then when they got rid of DDT, the thing changed. So back 1980s, I can't remember the exact year, two people, Rav Pinchas Badner, Lahad ben Chaim B'Chaim, Rav Gissinger, Rav Shlomo Gissinger, did two movies, two videos. They were kosher videos, and everybody watched it, even the big Rabbanim. It was all about the bugs in vegetables. And it showed you the plane coming down and spraying the crops. And it showed you how it was things that were done with the DDT, and then it stopped, and then they showed you the insects live crawling on the vegetables. And you got the message very clearly. And that was the very beginning. Shortly afterwards, Bodek opened up. Right. Later on, you got Positive. You got other groups. In Israel, you got groups. But all of that happened because we became aware through those two Rabbanim. It opened the eyes of America to something that was going on for a few years, because the end of DDT, there was a little lag until we became aware of it. So this is not a creation of the Kashrus organizations at all. But that just puts us into a little bit of a history. And then afterwards, the different organizations got better. First we just took regular produce, and they were sample checking. Then later on, they were doing more checking. Then they were growing especially, or in some cases, they used from the field only the parts of the field that they felt didn't have much insect infestation. There are different levels of insect infestation, to a point where it requires a bedika, a check of every single leaf, and sometimes it only requires a sample checking, not requiring the same level of checking. Some is a checking midoraisa from the Torah law, and some is only midorabanan. But whatever all those that checking levels are, we now have a situation where we have a problem, and the agencies are taking care of it. So eventually we developed the greenhouses, but not every greenhouse is the same. Some greenhouses, just the word greenhouse, greenhouse, that's special. But it's not so, because insects can get in. You have to have a very good control to make sure that nothing gets into the greenhouse. That is where a lot of the discussion is about whether or not this specific vegetable from this company is good or not good, because the question is, what did they do at their greenhouses?
So let me ask you, are we better off or worse off today, where perhaps the infestation is worse, but we're also blessed. You mentioned Bodek Positive, so many other companies. When you go into any kosher supermarket today, you have a wide variety of options, buying what we'll call no checking required types of vegetables, romaine and others. So how would you judge today's situation? Are we better off or are we worse off?
This is the question of the day. I would just throw in, before I answer that question, the other things that are happening today. They now add aeroponics. And that's, everybody knows about the new companies that are coming out now that are producing cheaply and less long, and they're in thousands of stores. And it's a new brands that are coming out, not the Jewish brands, the non-Jewish brands with hashgacha, and they are producing aeroponics, not in water, on regular water, but what they call aeroponics, from the air. And so the situation today, there's plenty of opportunities. The question is, what is required? What's a necessity? Very complicated. And that's why you need Yiras Shamayim here, and you have to look into it through the eyes of Rabbanim who know the story well. Everybody has to decide who they are. Mm-hmm. There are some people who don't eat some of these vegetables. And I advise everybody who's listening, if you can do it, to spend a few hours or even a few minutes and study some of the tshuvas that are written in the Darkei Tshuva about the periods in his time and back beyond. It's amazing how hard it was to be a Jew, how many vegetables they had to give up, how hard it was to be a Jew in the old days. Whatever we have today is easier. Because simply, if you take a kashgacha on any one of these vegetables and you're not convinced, or even like strawberries, for example, and you're not convinced that they're perfect, you could blend it. And if you blended it, you're allowed to blend it because you can be soymech that there was not a real infestation, and you're allowed to blend it, and then after it's blended, there's nothing left anymore. So there are solutions today, but the person who has Yiras Shamayim is going to have to discuss with his Rav where to go on this topic.
Got it. Okay. On that note, thank you. Thank you for this interesting conversation about insect infestation. We look forward to speaking to you again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.